In the name of God. The Adventures of Jacob. Episode 1, The Hardworking Donkey and the Lazy Horse. Once upon a time, there lived a man named Jacob. Jacob was a simple man. Since childhood, he was the subject of ridicule in his town. In school, his friends would always sit him at the front of the class and tease him from behind. In the old days, people would go to the local shop to get oil, sugar, and cheese using ration coupons. Thus, the locals and Jacob's friends always took his place in line for sugar and oil, tricking him with their words and taking advantage of his naivety. For example, while waiting in line for oil, they'd say, "Jacob, what are you doing here?" Jacob would reply, "I came to get oil." They would tell him, "Jacob, don't you know that the best oil is at the bottom of the barrel? The later you go, the better oil you'll get." Naively, Jacob would fall for it and go to the back of the line. This led to the stories of Jacob becoming well known. Now, let's listen to today's story about Jacob. Jacob had a friend named Isaac. Unlike Jacob, Isaac was clever and smart, so he usually helped Jacob and prevented others from taking advantage of him. One day, there was a wedding in the neighborhood, and the father of the groom was a wealthy man who invited all the locals to the banquet. Jacob was thrilled and told his friend Isaac that they should go and enjoy the feast. Isaac looked at Jacob and asked, "What then?" Jacob replied, "What do you mean, what then? We'll eat lunch and return home with full stomachs, that's it." Isaac said, "Well, I'm thinking about how we can fill our stomachs for several days." Jacob asked, "How?" Isaac replied, "You know the father of the groom is very rich, and undoubtedly, they'll bring silver and gold cutlery for lunch. Do you understand what I'm saying? Are you in or not?" Jacob said, "I don't get it. What exactly do we need to do? Just say it straightforward so I can understand." Isaac said, "Oh, come on, luck is on our side tonight. Jacob, we can secretly steal the silver and gold cutlery during the commotion of the banquet and sell them to pay off our debts." Jacob replied, "No, Isaac, that's stealing. I'm anything but a thief." Isaac retorted, "What's stealing? We'll take them as a gift for the bride and groom. We're not going to take all the cutlery, just what we need. We could even say we're borrowing them as collateral for a business deal, and once we get wealthy, we'll return them." Eventually, after much persuasion, Jacob, in his simplicity, agreed. Isaac then suggested, "Let's make a pact. We promise that whatever we manage to take, we will divide equally." Jacob said, "Okay, let's see what happens." Thus, Jacob and Isaac entered the banquet. To avoid suspicion, they separated and found their own corners at the table, pretending to be just like the other guests. The man sitting next to Isaac turned to him and said, "It seems there's a delightful aroma coming from the stew." Isaac replied, "Yes, that's right." His eyes were on the tray of cutlery, calculating how to steal the silver and gold items. Finally, when the stew and rice were served, and the silver and gold cutlery was placed next to each plate, Isaac immediately grabbed his own cutlery, pretending to eat. He awaited the moment when the man next to him would pick up his cutlery, but despite his efforts to distract him, he couldn't manage it. Ultimately, he only had his own cutlery. Now, let's see what Jacob is doing on the other side of the table. Jacob was a simple man. As soon as he saw the stew and rice, he couldn't help himself and quickly reached for some bread and started eating with his hands, forgetting about the cutlery altogether. Jacob was so delighted with the food that two people sitting next to him felt that eating with hands seemed more delicious. They turned to Jacob and said, "Brother, the way you are eating makes it seem like you're having heavenly food." Jacob, with his mouth full, replied, "You have no idea how delicious eating with your hands is. It's a whole different experience." Immediately, the two guests placed their cutlery beside Jacob's plate and started eating. After a few bites, they praised the food enthusiastically, and one of them remarked, "Wise men say eating with hands has many benefits." The other added, "Eating with silver and gold cutlery isn't enjoyable." As soon as Jacob heard the mention of cutlery, food got stuck in his throat, and he began to cough incessantly. He suddenly remembered why he was there. The people around Jacob noticed he was choking and got up to help him. One offered him water, another patted his back, yet Jacob kept thinking about the cutlery. Finally, the one who was patting Jacob noticed he was in distress. He thought, none of this is helping, and patted Jacob's back harder, causing him to tumble into the table. When Jacob opened his eyes, he saw the cutlery amidst all the chaos. He quickly grabbed his own and the nearby guest's cutlery and stuffed them into his large pocket. Isaac, witnessing this spectacle, was astonished. He thought to himself, could it be that Jacob has been playing us all along? Maybe he's not as foolish as we thought. Just then, he dismissed the thought, thinking, no, Jacob, clever? Surely, luck must be on his side tonight. As Isaac was contemplating, he approached Jacob after the meal and said softly, friend, don't forget our agreement. Jacob replied, what agreement? Isaac said, the agreement to split everything 50-50. Jacob retorted, no way. There was no such agreement. Whatever each of us managed to grab belongs to us individually. You wanted to be clever and grab more. Now that you see I collected more, you're trying to pull this trick. Isaac recognized that Jacob was becoming greedy and devised a plan. Toward the end of the banquet, he addressed the host and said, your banquet was outstanding, but there was one thing missing. The wealthy host, not wanting his guests to feel dissatisfied, inquired, what was missing? Isaac said, entertainment. Your banquet was magnificent, but it would be much more enjoyable if you dedicated part of it to some entertainment. The host replied, you're right, but I didn't plan for such a thing. It's too late now. Isaac continued, don't worry, I have skills in magic tricks and illusions. If you'd like, I can perform some tricks for our guests to add some fun. The host addressed the guests, please be informed that our first-class magician, Isaac, will now put on a show. He then asked Isaac what he would need for the performance. Isaac said, I only need 3 sets of gold cutlery. When brought, Isaac took them and put them in his pocket, saying, in front of all of you, I will make these pieces of cutlery move from my pocket to someone else's. The crowd exclaimed, no way. Isaac replied, very well, then. Here I am, Isaac the magician. He recited an incantation and gestured with his fingers at his pocket, saying, oh cutlery, go into the pocket of that young man named Jacob. Isaac skillfully redirected the cutlery into another pocket of his. When he finished, he pulled out his empty pocket, revealing it to everyone. Several volunteers went to check Jacob's pocket, and to everyone's astonishment, they found the cutlery had indeed ended up in Jacob's pocket. Everyone was amazed, and they applauded Isaac. Thus, Isaac had 3 sets of golden cutlery, and Jacob was left with an empty pocket. Jacob went up to Isaac and said, that was quite a performance. You haven't forgotten our arrangement, right? Isaac smirked and said, friend, the tale of the hard-working donkey and the lazy horse has long been forgotten. Dear friends, I hope you enjoyed this story. We are also waiting for your requests for more stories in the comments.